Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I want to talk about how technology can help independence for people with vision impairment, with all sorts of disabilities for that matter. But I also want to point out during this 15 minutes that technology of itself is not the answer. People are much more important than the technology. It is using the technology wisely that is good. Next slide, please, Emma. Sorry, we have to do it that way for technical reasons, which I won't bore you with. So what I'm going to talk about, I'll give you a very brief background to me so you get some idea of where I've come from. I'm going to talk about my journey with assistive technology. That will expand into some other technologies as well. I'm going to finish by talking about the checkered progress of electronic travel aids, which is one of my hobby horse stroke bugbears. Next, please, Emma. So who is Andrew? My twin brother and I were born with congenital glaucoma, for a reason we don't really know. I had some useful vision, until almost the age of 15. When I say useful, I could identify colours and read very large print, but I was reading Braille from the age of 5, so it wasn't what you would really say was special vision. Our parents ran a sheep farm, and that was a great environment for exploring and going around and doing all sorts of things, getting familiar with running and jumping and falling and such, with or without parental consent. Education. I went to the School for Blind Children at Wahroonga, which then moved to North Rocks. I left school after year 10 because everyone agreed that that was the pinnacle of my academic ability. In my defence, I lost quite a bit of time having ultimately unsuccessful operations to preserve the little bit of vision I had. But subsequently, I went to Macquarie Uni, achieved an honours degree in psychology. 10 years later, I did a postgrad diploma in education at UTS. Next, please. A very brief history of my work. My first job was working in a factory on a small lathe. I worked for 2 hospitals in the medical records department of both, doing clerical work. And then I worked for 9 years for a law firm, again doing clerical work, and that's what paid my way through university. After I finished at Macquarie, I worked for 9 years at what was then the Royal Blind Society as a vocational counsellor for 9 years. And then I worked, as Michael mentioned, for 25 years for TAFE New South Wales in various educational roles. They keep restructuring the place. Working all the time with various assistive technologies. I now work 1 day a week for UTS as an accessibility consultant with a specific role of working with students with, you've guessed it, technology. And although I'm a psychologist by training and inclination, I don't know if it's fate or aptitude or a bit of both, so it seems to keep me steering towards working with technology all the time. Next, please, Emma. I want to stress the importance of being on the lookout for solutions to problems rather than dwelling on the problem. And this is just a quick example, but when I started doing a welfare work certificate at Sydney Tech, as it was at the time, I started taking notes on a slate and stylus, which is the most primitive form of writing Braille. And I wasn't all that good at it either. And I realised very quickly that that was not going to be an effective way of taking notes. At the time, I was working at Sydney Hospital and the doctors were dictating their reports onto portable dictation machines. And I thought, well, there's an idea. And I bought one of those little machines and dictated my notes in a hoarse whisper, which pleasingly didn't upset the other students. And I took those notes home and wrote them up into hard copy braille. And I used that system all the way through until I started my honours year. At that stage, there was a new device available called the VersaBraille. It was a device with a 20-cell electronic braille display. That was a huge step forward because I could take notes on it rather than having to whisper. And I could also use it to access the university's mini computer for statistical work and for formatting my thesis. And that device was followed really by a lot of purpose-built note-taking devices and screen readers. Next, please, Emma. There's been a very pleasing convergence of assistive and mainstream technology, particularly over the last 20 years or so. It used to be that screen readers, which is software, and magnification equipment, which could be software or hardware, were commercial products, they cost money. And for a screen reader, not only did one have to buy the screen reader, but you also had to buy the speech synthesizer, which was in a little box, which connected to the connected to the computer's serial port. Does anyone remember what a serial port is? A few. So that was a costly thing. Now, screen readers and some magnification facilities are built into essentially all computers, tablets, and phones. I'm using the free NVDA screen reader for this, for most of what I do on the computer as a by the way. Commercial options are still available and are completely relevant. And purpose-built equipment is certainly still relevant. Some more examples of the convergence. Optical character recognition. The first machine that I met that would do that was the Kurzweil reading machine. That was in about 1990. It was the size of a small washing machine and made similar noises. And it did a reasonable job. But these days, we have either inexpensive or free optical character recognition software built into computers, phones, etc., which is, I mean, I can wave my phone at a piece of paper and the thing will just present the information. That's just extraordinary. Speech to text, relevant more for people with severe physical disabilities, but has lots of relevance for people with vision impairment as well. The first example I saw was in 1992. The card that went into the computer to make it work cost $13,000, and one had to speak very, very carefully to make it understand anything. And these days, again, built into phones and computers and such, with an extraordinary level of accuracy, given what it's coping with. Next, please, Emma. In 2008, I was having lunch with some colleagues and one of them showed me his new iPhone. And with all my supposed knowledge of this stuff, I said, well done, Apple. You've made a product that can't be accessible because of the touchscreen. 12 months later, they released the Apple iPhone 3G, which included VoiceOver, the screen reader that's built into the iPhone. And I said, whoops. So it was the first phone that had an inbuilt screen reader. So you didn't have to go and buy another piece of equipment to make the phone work. And being a touchscreen device, that really was very disruptive technology in the best sense of the word. So we now have a little thing which is on my belt, which not only is a phone, but it can provide contacts and calendars and public transport information and GPS information, all sorts of stuff. It's just extraordinary. And there have been lots of other accessibility features added since for people with all sorts of disabilities. And Android has joined the party. I can't get my head around TalkBack, which is their screen reader, but other people find it good. Next, please, Emma. Okay, brief history of electronic travel aids. When I was working in the factory, having come back to Sydney after finishing school and left the farm, and I was feeling pretty trapped. I wasn't doing much and wasn't travelling very far. And I thought, I need a guide dog, and I applied, and that transformed my whole expectation about moving around. So instead of worrying about going to the local shops, I was looking for excuses to come into the city and go shopping and such. And I have a theory that that among people with severe vision impairment, overall confidence is linked to confidence in moving around confidently. And now I haven't tested the theory, but there's a PhD there for someone who wants to pick it up. The Sonic Guide, I was in the second group of 2 in the world to be in a pilot training session for the forerunner of the Sonic Guide. It's a spectacle mounted device. There's a picture of it there. Spectacles, quite heavy spectacles, with 3 transducers at the front. It uses ultrasound and provides a very rich sound information about the surroundings. A shame about the ugly bloke that's wearing it, but we won't worry about that. I became so confident with it that when my guide dog retired, I was quite happy to keep using it along with the long cane. There have been several other ultrasonic devices since. The Sonic Guide is no longer available, which is very sad. I now use the Mini Guide, which is that little bloke. That's made by Greg Phillips in Adelaide, the most retiring man you've ever come across, which is a shame. It's a wonderful little device. It's the antithesis to the Sonic Guide in that all it does is provide by either audio or vibration the distance to the nearest object. Some work going on with cameras to provide information. I think the big challenge there is because the information will have to be censored, and the engineers will have to decide what information will be presented and how it will be presented. The iPhone Pro, which uses LiDAR for the cameras, is showing lots of potential for providing useful information. I don't have an iPhone Pro, so I can't tell you more about it. And implants for those with intact optic tracts is progressing and looking quite encouraging. Next, please, Emma. Psychosocial implications of electronic travel aids. Historically, blindness agencies and some blindness groups were quite opposed to electronic travel aids. And even now, I suspect there is quite a lot of gatekeeping on the part of agencies in terms of telling clients about what is available apart from the long cane. And the dog is a different issue entirely. There's a very long learning curve, particularly for the more sophisticated stuff, and I suspect a lot of people stopped using the Sonic Guide before they reached that point. I was still learning lots of things after 6 months. And we need to understand much more about people's individual perceptual differences to design a really effective, sophisticated device. Next, please, Emma. In conclusion, we have some wonderful tools these days for information provision. So for accessing the internet, for reading hard copy material when you have to, all sorts of stuff. It's wonderful. There's a lot of potential for further development of electronic travel aids. Appropriate individual selection and skill development is crucial. I believe that perseverance is much more important than inspiration. I think it was Thomas Edison who said, when asked about his success, he said 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. So it does mean a lot of effort. Really important to look for solutions and to keep up with developments. With persistence, confusion and frustration will give way to clarity and a great deal of fulfillment.
I just want to, before we go on, just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that you guys are on, the Gadigal clan, and from the Eora Nation where we're meeting, and just pay respects to elders past, present, and our future Aboriginal leaders. And I'm just going to interrupt, sorry, and go to presentation mode so people can see better. Sorry, everybody. There you go. How's that? Is that better? Perfect. Terrific. Yeah, I just want to also acknowledge any Aboriginal people that are at this community day today. And Ginagay, I'm sitting on the beautiful Gumbaynggirr country, and this is a picture of the Nambucca River, and behind me is also part of the beautiful Nambucca, and this is a place of significance to the Gumbaynggirr people, and on the photograph on the right hand side of the screen you can see some signage of the foreground, in the foreground, and if you come to beautiful Nambucca, you can read, or you can have your iPhone OCR camera feature that Andrew had mentioned, convert all of these signage so that you can read the cultural stories that are found around this area. I'm Gai Cross from the Inclusive Education team with the Department of Education, and I just want to share with you, it's a really quick overview about how our schools are making the most of technology in the classroom to provide students access to their learning, and as it is in the classroom. So I think Andrew said as well, you know, it's not all about technology, and I know I'm sure that many of you, whether you're teachers or students or parents, when you're in schools, starting with a focus on just a piece of technology is not necessarily going to ensure a successful outcome. So there first needs to be some solid planning around both this idea of this universal level, which is just really good practice and lots of options for everybody in the classroom, just right from the start. And then for some students with disability, there might be a more personalised approach needed as well. So the first thing for teachers in particular to consider when they start like lesson planning is thinking about how they might provide multiple options that will support, you know, all of the vast diverse range of student needs. And then this intent, I guess, of taking this universal design approach is that the strategies that are made available will support everybody, their strengths as well as their needs, and different preferences as well in the classroom. And then for individual students with low vision or who are blind, a collaborative approach needs to be taken, and this is done with the classroom teacher working really closely with our support teacher vision, parents and carers, possibly external agencies, and of course, most importantly at all times is the student, because they're the ones that things need to work for. And this is known as personalised learning and support, and it occurs generally through an annual review of service. But having said that, there's always additional collaboration between the students' team whenever needed, whenever something comes up that needs to be worked through. And as Andrew said, you know, it's about, you know, it's not just the problem, it's how we're going to solve these problems. The SET framework, which some of you may be familiar with, that was something that was developed by the legendary Joy Zabula, and provides a process of technology selection so that this collaborative team that we're just talking about can make the most of technology for learning in the classroom. So it starts with the students' strengths, their needs and their preferences, and then it looks at the environment that the student is in, and then as well as the task and the different types of tasks that are being asked of that student as well. And then we select the best types of technology for use in the classroom in the different contexts. And in a secondary setting and tertiary settings, that could be different from classroom to classroom depending on the nature of the subject. So once the technology that's needed for a student with low vision or who's blind is planned in this collaborative manner, the devices to support curriculum access are often, we are finding, able to be provided by the school in the first instance. Not always, but often that's becoming more and more easy for schools to harness what's already available in the system. But sometimes, if that's not possible, a process that is known as the, if I'm presuming we've got some teachers in our the audience there, it's known as the support technology and equipment program, can be initiated by the school and the local education office to obtain that additional specialised equipment that is often needed. So there's so many technology options, so many, and so many technology options that have been there for some time, and it's just exponentially increasing, isn't it? As Andrew said, there's like, new updates coming all the time, and you think something's not there, and the next time you check, you go, oh my God, that's amazing. That'll solve this problem that we were thinking and talking about before. Terrific. So there's just so many to support students in the classroom as well in that area. So on the right-hand side, I've got a list of links around the places to find information about those latest technology and accessibility features. In particular, our schools use a lot of Microsoft, Apple, and Google. And there's also down the bottom some links for the department teachers that you might find useful. And I'll make sure that the organizer distributes those links after the session. The types of technology that we can make the most of might take the form of various devices, platforms, software and apps, and digital lesson materials. So, and it is just so great that we're seeing these leading technology companies constantly improving their products with embedded accessibility features, such as your screen readers, your voiceovers, your screen magnification, your invert colors, your color filters, the easy connection to external braille devices, and the list goes on from there. And in the classroom, the technology selected through the vision support team around that student might start with universal devices and platforms used across the school, and they might that might already be in the school. So devices may be school owned, might come from the home, might come elsewhere. Accessibility features and settings within the devices can be personalized for a particular student's needs. Like iPads, for example, I know I got an update coming through in iOS 16 that there's even more accessibility options to support vision. And it's Andrew was mentioning, those options. And I think and you have to have the latest iPhone Pro, but I don't have one either, Andrew. Wish I did, but there's even possibilities for detecting doorways. So there's some really exciting updates coming through there, and more specialized low vision tools and braille devices might also form part of the technology student might use in the classroom at different times. Platforms that might be used by teachers to distribute lesson content might be things like a Google Classroom or Microsoft Team. There are many others that they're a couple of the core ones that some of our schools use, and they can provide universal access for all students across different devices. So it could be one, some people have iPads, some people have Windows, some people have Chromebooks, and it's it allows that variability of options for students to use their own devices that are suited for them or personalised for them. We've got settings and browser extensions as well that provide more and more free inbuilt options for read aloud dictation at that base level. Of course, additional software and apps may also be needed in addition to further personalise the learning experience for particular students. And of course, one of the most important types of technologies to support students with low vision or who are blind are digital lesson materials, such as accessibly formatted worksheets. And this is something that all teachers can work on at a universal level, since what may be, I think it's coming from, I'm channeling Greg Alchin, what might be essential for one is actually good practice and helpful and useful for all. So in our department, we also have the Braille and large print unit, which includes our 3D printed objects library. So that's really exciting space. And all of those things come together to form that accessible lesson content for all students, but absolutely essential for our students who are blind or have low vision. We do have some training for department teachers in that space of accessibility, accessible documents, and how you can personalise technology. This is, yes, so these are a couple of examples. I mentioned the 3D print library, and these have been created by and for our department schools at the moment. And the pictures on the left show a student using touch on a 3D model to identify a natural terrain. It's part of a lesson. And below that is trying to identify the map of Queensland and the aspects of Queensland landforms. And the right-hand side shows some other examples of the terrain 3D objects that we've got. So there's a range of these 3D printed objects and models for different subjects, and that's been built on. So that's a nice, exciting space. Thanks to our 3D printing technology that's come about in recent years. So, and it's really important to note that this 3D library is not being created just for students with vision impairments, but it's been designed inclusive for all students in a classroom. So that's really lovely kind of benefit to everybody, and very inclusive of students that absolutely need that kind of technology. Other types of emerging technologies have been around for a little while, so not that emerging, but they're certainly being developed, is that idea of accessible coding. And some students are using STEM-related resources focused on coding, and the coding technologies can be used, some can be used, or actually the two that you see on the screen, which I'll explain in a moment, can be used by students who rely on auditory cues and screen readers and voiceover. And some are more accessible than others at the moment, but I know these are two examples that are being used in some schools. And Code Jumper is an accessible block coding tool set, mainly for younger students, but it's designed to be inclusive. It's enabling all students to work together, but it's also immediately accessible for kids who are blind or have low vision. So it's a nice tool for the toolkit. And on the right-hand side is a graphic of Swift Playgrounds, which is an iPad coding app, which is compatible with the iPad's inbuilt voiceover, read aloud, and Zoom features. And some people have great success with that. Some people say I've got something else that I prefer, and that's perfectly fine as well. So there's lots of different examples, as I said. So yeah, we've got a plethora, I love that word, plethora of technologies to choose from. And so many are now found embedded universally within a device's system for free. You've got to still purchase the device, of course, but once you have it, there's so many options there for you to choose from. And I don't know that everyone always knows about what's there. And teachers in particular, flat chat and often haven't got the time to explore. So it's really valuable when we have our itinerant support teacher vision team who are aware of these options that can really start to promote some, basic universal options that might be what some students need. So, and I guess that's the idea of making the most of what technology might already be there in the student's own personalised devices as well. So there's also that need for more specialised and targeted technology to fill any gaps after that, or to enhance particular functional requirements. And that's all dependent, of course, on the context of the learning environment and the students' needs as well. So the pictures on the screen show on the left the accessibility settings on an iPad with voiceover. Which is highlighted, and the picture on the right shows an iPad with a refreshable Braille display keyboard. And I guess the point is here on this page is that students have the option to choose what suits them for the particular learning environment that they are in. Now, in a secondary classroom, I just want to try and put this together as an example, because the options are like pretty much endless. They seem endless at times. It's just like in a secondary classroom, for example, here's a workflow that makes good use of the technology that we've got in our schools with additional specialised devices or software as necessary. So starting on the left, the teacher sends the lesson materials to all students through a digital platform such as Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, or it could be something else, in an accessible format. For example, the teacher might use a Google slide deck that is shared with the students, and that can be updated in real time as the teacher makes notes on the interactive whiteboard. And the teacher can also easily add alt text to images as well on the fly, and then that then goes to the student who can access, or students who can access the content on their own devices, and they might then use Zoom or their screen reader or VoiceOver or invert colours or other options to engage with that lesson, with the lesson content. And varying technologies, again, options available that can then be used to for the student to complete the task and demonstrate what they've learned to the teachers. And this could be something like a Google form I've seen being used for an assessment on the content. All students in the classroom, if it's delivered this way and they have the option to present in different ways, they can make that choice around the ways they might respond. So some students might use their screen reader to navigate and then type or dictate, or around keyboard to type into the response boxes on the form. Okay, now I'm aware we're probably well and truly out of time. It was just a quick note on transition, on that idea of transition from secondary to tertiary education, and the key message there is to start early, and it's a collaborative process. There's plenty of supports in the secondary setting, vision support teacher and the support teacher transition, connecting with the university to plan, or the TAFE to plan and discuss options, especially around what technology may be needed as the transition happens, and that engagement with external services and other support people in the community. So yeah, I've got, as I said, I've got the links that are in the slide deck. I can make sure that they become available to you, and hope that's given you a quick overview. was very, very quick.
Thank
And
you.
I believe we've got some questions now.
We
So I need to stop, and Andrew and I will do our best to answer some of the questions that some people put through.
Thank you, Gai. Much appreciated. Andrew, you can take the podium again, and we'll start with some questions from the floor. Just so you know, caveat, I forgot to mention to everyone, there are microphones in the ceiling, which is where the green dots are. Now, I'm not saying those because we're going to use them. We're a bit uncertain about how well they pick up voice, so we are going to bring a microphone to you with the questions. But from a caveat and a liability perspective, FYI, there are microphones listening to you. No, and this has been recorded. Okay, if anyone's got any questions from the floor, just put up your hand and we will bring a microphone to you. Otherwise, I have a list that you pre-submitted. Okay, let's get it. Oh, there we do.
Just check we can hear you properly. Can you hear me? Yeah. I guess the question that I have is that sometimes when I'm working alongside schools, I'm finding that there seems to be a bit of resistance sometimes, maybe from, it depends on who it is, but it can be sometimes the principals, or it could be maybe the school teacher. Just wondering if there's any tips or things that you can suggest that I could do, because that's kind of what my role is that I'm supporting families when they transition into school. And yeah, just if there's any advice will be much appreciated.
Do you mean resistance from the institution or from the family, or both?
Not from the family, it's more from the school, the institution,
Start with the easy ones, eh? I think that's a question for Gai.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a me question. Look, I would probably recommend, and you may have already done this already, but the school's learning and support team is probably the very best place to start. And I can only talk from a Department of Ed perspective, not the other systems, but certainly every school will have a learning and support teacher and a learning and support, usually called a learning and support coordinator, who's the executive person. And then if contact can be made with those people, often they're the people who will then be able to get that more collaborative approach happening, and draw in the team members, come and have a meeting at the school, come and discuss what the options are. So that's probably the best place to start.
And it's really important to, it's easier to say than do, but to get across to people that not all students have an IQ of 100, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms and 2 legs. And people learn in different ways. So we need to try to get people to think more flexibly, but it can be a journey.
Okay.
And certainly from the school level, the learning and support team should be able to make connection with the itinerant support teacher vision, who will be able to give more support as well to the students' team.
This is actually a follow-up to that question. My name's Amber. I'm a parent of a vision impaired child. I just wanted to clarify from your question, what specifically is in which areas is the pushback coming from? Is it with technology? Is it with funding? Is it with staffing? Is it with resourcing? Because, we're in this space right now, and I'd be very keen to hear what the biggest concerns are coming from that last question. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. I'm just trying to reflect back. So, I usually do support the families, and especially the parents that are coming to me and saying that they've tried to raise particular concerns for their child in getting the supports that they need in the classroom. So I would say that they would say to me that it's usually, it can be, trying to be diplomatic, it can, I feel like the pushback can sometimes be a bit political. I don't know how else to explain that. In the sense that some schools, they can be resistant to having external services come in. So, I mean, the most recent one that I had was supporting a young refugee child who was 16, had a vision impairment. And so, like, I had liaised with the ISTV teacher and all of that. That was all good. They had some training in orientation and mobility, but from the needs of the child, and when I talked to my colleagues, we thought that it would be really good to have our orientation and mobility specialist be involved, you know, with supporting this child to navigate around the school safely and to not have trips and falls. And there was kind of a bit of pushback where they were like, well, our teacher is trained in, you know, this, which I understand. But I think there was just a bit more specifics that needed to be done. Like, we needed to order a long cane. We needed to, you know, mark the settings in the mark the stairs around the school. So yeah, it's more, I would say it's a bit more politics. I don't know how else to explain that, but it's just sometimes schools, I've noticed, have been a bit resistant with external services to come in because they felt like we were overstepping what the Department of Education needed, or who was there. Like, we do have our role, which is obviously outside the school. We can't go in there, but it just depends on what's going on. Yeah, so there's just sometimes things like that.
Follow up to that.
Yeah, I think collaboration absolutely is the key, and the other thing is all schools operate, in all areas across the state operate, you know, as a school, and so I think if you can get that collaboration happening, it definitely does in places. You know, that is when things come together really nicely. If there are difficulties, and you feel maybe there's more to discuss, certainly, you know, asking at the school for maybe a meeting with, you know, the deputy or the principal, with the vision support teacher, and the parents, that could be another option as well.
Gai, just one further comment, and this may not be relevant to your expertise. It might be something that comes up later on in the day, but again, it's in this same space again. We're finding that, and this goes on your point previously as well, about external people coming into the schools. We're facing issues at the moment with schools giving pushback from that same place about not wanting you to come into the school externally. And I have a feeling that it's coming from insurance sides of things. Now, I may be delving into a whole new topic here, which is not relevant to you, and obviously independent schools versus Catholic schools versus the Department of Education is all quite different. But we're being told at the moment by one particular school that they're not necessarily able to have a Vision Australia or Next Sense, for example, in their school for insurance reasons, and they can't be in the classroom with other children. And I'm just thinking that this is just bordering on ridiculous. But I wanted to know from people here today, and again, like I said, it might be another session, not this particular one, because we're talking about technology, but you know, that to me, it just bucks the whole system. That's what these organisations are for, to come into the classroom to help the child access the curriculum. And we're being told that they're not allowed in the classroom for privacy reasons, that they can't be seeing what the other children are doing, and they might be witness to something that I just don't know whether that's just a fob off or whether this is actually a legitimate issue.
It's been a long-standing issue.
Yeah, look, yeah, I can understand where what you're talking about, and I look, to be honest, probably it's not the forum to have the discussion, and I can't really speak on behalf of any like particular school or situation. But I'll certainly raise the question with my team, and just to make sure that there's a, you know, increased awareness that is an issue that seems to be ongoing.
Hey, I'll throw a quick couple of questions in that were fielded from the internet and submissions, the tickets, and then we'll move through. What I would say, though, suggesting as a parent myself of a VI child, is that as a gathering of community that doesn't happen that often, we have 3 breaks, and I would very much encourage people who feel they have common interests or life situations, get together. Don't just eat, get together and share notes to conspire against the system. So that's possibly worth it. So yeah, there we go. I think Andrew agrees, although officially doesn't at all. Now, so I'll throw a few. So Braille keyboards, are Braille keyboards popular for blind students learning to touch type on a computer? I think I could also thread that in, you know, what's the state of the art? What's the latest technology?
If the student is learning Braille, then a Braille keyboard is pretty much essential. I would strongly encourage any kid to learn to use keyboards, whether it's, well, Braille keyboard and QWERTY keyboard, and to use it really comfortably and accurately without having to look at keys, particularly relevant to kids who are losing, or adults for that matter, who are likely to lose vision because they finish up where their vision is too poor to see the keys. They keep hearing the wretched thing and it slows them down dreadfully. Because I'm so ancient, I learned to type on a manual typewriter. And that encouraged accuracy, because when I was writing legal documents, I made a typo. It was a day's march to fix it. But yeah, confidence in using the keyboard without having to look at it, is really, really important. And whether it's the Braille keyboard, I mean, both are important if you're using a Braille device, whether it's hard copy Braille or an electronic device. So yeah, both.
And state of the art?
Sorry?
State of the art? What's the newest, coolest thing?
In terms of Braille devices? Was that?
In terms of Braille.
Well, there's some nice little
or
electronic Braille devices available. Your focus range from Freedom, the Braillean from Humanware, Braille Note Touch. There's a gadget that I haven't seen yet called the Can Use 360. Quantum cell it, and it has, as the name suggests, 360 cells in 9 rows of 40. Now, it's not to be used as an interface for the computer. It is more intended that you copy your book, whatever it is, onto it and then read it. So instead of having to change the display after every 20 or 40 or 80 characters, you read the whole, essentially A4 page or 9 lines of Braille before you change. I've spoken to one person who has one and finds it really, really nice. Apparently it can display graphics. It would be a fairly coarse graphics, but that's interesting. American Printing House for the Blind were developing a thing called Graffiti, which is a great name, which was a Braille display for presenting graphics. And I think they've given up on that, but they've started a new venture again to display Braille graphics. That's looking very exciting as well.
Okay, I'm very. There's one last question that I know is unpacking a Pandora's box of passion, but I'll say if you had 30 seconds to answer this question, Mac or PC?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Use one of them, it's great. There we go. And use
Very much on the individual. My suspicion is
Yes.
that the Windows screen readers are a bit more advanced than VoiceOver, and it depends what software the person needs to be using. I think where the Mac is really potentially useful is people with useful vision and want to use the speech output to augment the screen display. I think it can work really quite nicely in that situation. But yeah, it's a personal choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, my slight, and I haven't used the Mac for several years, of course they took it from me when I left TAFE. And I think there have been some improvements since. But I suspect that the Windows system is just a little bit better for screen reader users. But,
okay,
yeah.
we're there. There we go. I'm not allowing any feedback there. It's going to be an over. Okay, Andrew and Gai, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thanks you.